The second one for the love of Fatima al-Zahra with the loudest of your voices. The third for the reappearance of our 12th Imam, Imam Sahib al-Asri wal-Zaman with the loudest of your voices. Samahat al-Shaykh, my brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Before we begin with the lecture, inshallah, just a quick reminder, tomorrow's program will begin at 5:40 p.m. With the Quran Circle, followed by Salat, and then Iftar, sponsored in the gym. After that, we'll be having the Dua al-Iftitah and the lecture, inshallah. Without further ado, please welcome Samahat Shaykh Azhar Nasser with 3 of your loudest of salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. ثانية على حب الحسن والحسين. على حب فاطمة الزهراء الثالثة بأعلى أصواتكم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. ولعنة الله على أعدائهم ومنكر فضائلهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Respected scholars, elders, my dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Last night we spoke about the incident between Zuleikha and Yusuf. And we mentioned how they both raced towards the door. When Zuleikha tried to force herself on Yusuf, he immediately turned away and he ran for the door. And because she had locked a number of doors, Yusuf alayhi salam was running from one door to another, unlocking one door, running to the next door. And as he was trying to escape, the Quran tells us that Zuleikha, she grabbed the tail of his shirt and she tore his shirt from behind until they reached the final door which exits the palace, and this is where they find Aziz, the husband. And the moment Yusuf and Zuleikha discover Aziz, who the Bible names as Potiphar, she says to him, قالت ما جزاء من أراد بأهلك سوءا. She says to her husband, what is the punishment for one who intends harm for your family? Notice, it's not even a question about who is guilty in her mind. Because she's in a position of authority, she immediately shifts the blame to Yusuf. What should be the punishment for someone who intends evil? Notice that when someone is guilty, usually they are very ambiguous in the way that they present a story. She doesn't specify what he did. She says, what is the punishment for one who intends evil? What does that even mean? What is the evil that he intended? She's very vague. She doesn't say, Yusuf touched me, or Yusuf did this and that. She says he intended. قالت ما جزاء من أراد. She didn't say that Yusuf did such and such action, that he violated my honor. She doesn't speak about any action of Yusuf. She says he intended. Why? Because if she accuses him of fornication, that would require a higher threshold of evidence. And there is no evidence to suggest that he did anything. So she decides to level the allegation. She accuses him of what? Of intending, right? Because intention is very subjective. He says, what is the punishment of one who intends evil for your family? Right? She was very cunning. She wanted to manipulate her husband. She wanted to feel as if he's trying to violate your honor and your family. إِلَّا أَن يُسْجَنَ أَوْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ. So she lies. And we mentioned last night, her ability to fabricate a lie in a split second tells us that this is a woman who was very comfortable with lying. She was a habitual liar, a pathological liar. You have to be a pathological liar to be able to forge a story and fabricate so quickly and so comfortably. Why does she lie? Because she wants to protect herself from the consequences of her actions. You know, there's an interesting narration where Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, he beautifully summarizes the motivations for lying. Why do people lie? Imam mentions two reasons. He says, إِيَّاكُمْ وَالْكَذِبِ. You know, this is why Amir al-Mu'mineen, he's the Imam of eloquence. So concise, so accurate. The Imam says, I warn you of lying. Beware of lying. فَإِنَّ كُلَّ رَاجٍ طَالِبٍ. Imam says, every hopeful person is a seeker. وَكُلَّ خَائِفٍ هَارِبٍ. And every fearful person is a fugitive. Now, what does the Imam mean by this? Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen is highlighting that people lie for two reasons. What are the two reasons? People lie because of excessive hope, right? They are seeking something that is unlawful. They want something, and they lie they lie so that they can acquire something that they hope to acquire. Or they lie because of fear of consequence. So the motivation for lying is either hope or fear. Hope to acquire something that you don't have, or fear that you might face a consequence. In this case, the motivation is what? Zuleikha lies out of fear. She's afraid that her reputation will be damaged. She's afraid that she will be punished for her infidelity. So she levels this accusation against Yusuf. So imagine they're standing at the door. Aziz is there. And Zuleikha is the first one to speak, basically accusing Yusuf of intending to fornicate with her. Now, what does Yusuf say? What is his response? Yusuf alayhi salam in ayah 26, he speaks. قال هي راودتني عن نفسي. Yusuf, unlike Zuleikha, he is very clear and direct. There's no ambiguity in his words. With Zuleikha, it was ambiguous. She was vague. He intended evil. What is the evil that he intended? She's not explicit. Yusuf alayhi salam, what does he say? She tried to seduce me. Very clear. There is no ambiguity. He's not vague. He states the facts in a very clear way. قال هي راودتني عن نفسي. And look at how polite and respectful Yusuf alayhi salam is. He doesn't speak to Zuleikha. He doesn't say, أنتِ راودتيني عن نفسي. He doesn't speak to her in the first person. He says she. He's speaking to her husband. He says she tried to seduce me. Now, what's interesting to note here is that one lesson that we learn is that a mu'min has a responsibility to defend their honor and their reputation. Now, what you notice is that in the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, he is accused of a crime 2 times. One time he defends himself, and another time he remains silent. Here, Yusuf alayhi salam, he defends himself. When he is accused of adultery, of fornication, he defends himself. He responds to the allegation. He doesn't allow this allegation, this accusation, to go unchallenged. At the end of the story, when Yusuf alayhi salam is the treasurer of Egypt, his brothers come to receive some aid. And if you look at ayah 77 of Surah Yusuf, what does it say? قالوا يسرق. The brothers are speaking to Yusuf, not knowing that it's Yusuf. قالوا يسرق, because an arrangement was made to make it look like Binyamin had stolen the king's cup. So the brothers say, قالوا يسرق فقد سرق أخ له من قبل. They say if Binyamin has stolen something, well, he had a brother who also stole before. Yusuf alayhi salam, he's there. He is hearing his own brothers accuse him of theft. Of course, the brothers don't know that they're speaking to Yusuf. But what does the Quran say? Does Yusuf challenge them? Does he speak up? Allah says, فَأَسَرَّهَا يُوسُفُ فِي نَفْسِهِ. He remained silent. He did not respond to that accusation. And this is a very important lesson for us. We have to use our wisdom to determine when it is necessary for us to respond to an accusation and when it's better to ignore it. Yusuf alayhi salam, with the incident with Zuleikha, he has to defend himself because he's a slave. If he doesn't defend himself, he could face a punishment. There is a potential harm if he does not speak out and defend himself against this accusation. So because he's in a position of weakness, he has to defend. But at the end of the story, when Yusuf alayhi salam is in a position of power, the brothers accuse him of stealing when he was younger. He doesn't have to respond because he has a plan. He wants to conceal his identity. And also, there is no threat of harm. He can ignore it. He's not going to face any harm. This is very important for us to reflect upon. We shouldn't feel the need to respond to every single accusation that we hear. In life, people are going to talk about you. They're going to mock you. They're going to insult you. You don't need to respond to everything. You have to use your judgment and you use your wisdom to determine which accusations, which false stories I need to respond to, and which ones I just need to ignore. And this applies even when it comes to attacks on our religion. There are some people who attack Islam, and maybe certain attacks need to be addressed. But should we respond to everyone who attacks Islam? Should we go on YouTube and respond to every attack that's made in the comment section? You won't have a life if that's what you decide to do. So here, Yusuf alayhi salam, he responds. Now, when you look at the response of Yusuf, what you find is that the way that he responds tells us a lot about his character and his faith. You see, if you put yourself in the shoes of Yusuf and you are accused of a serious crime like fornication, naturally you would imagine that in his words there would be a lot of emphasis. You know, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the way that the prophets would address their people, because most of the time prophets are sent to communities who doubt them, the prophets, when they affirm their messengerhood, they bring these emphatic elements in their speech. Inni ilaykum, inna ilaykum lamursalun. Indeed, we have been sent as messengers. Why are they using emphasis? Because they are speaking to a crowd who is doubtful. But Yusuf alayhi salam, he doesn't use any emphasis in his defense. Nor does he even say, Wallah. It's very interesting. You would think that Yusuf alayhi salam, in this precarious situation, he would say, Wallahi, I did not do anything wrong. He doesn't invoke the name of Allah. He doesn't say, he doesn't use any linguistic element of emphasis. Why? Because he's calm. This reveals to us that he was very composed. He doesn't feel the need to use strong assertions to establish his innocence. He has so much trust in Allah's justice that he doesn't come off as desperate to prove his innocence. He doesn't sound defensive. He simply says, هي راودتني عن نفسي. He's very composed. In a moment when most people would say, Wallah, he doesn't swear by Allah's name. And this is very important. You know, we have a narration where it is said, قال الحواريون لعيسى ابن مريم أوصينا. It is said that the disciples one day, they asked Isa alayhi salam for advice. He says to them, قال موسى لقومه. Isa alayhi salam, he quotes Musa. قال موسى لقومه لا تحلفوا بالله كاذبين. Musa used to say to Bani Israel, don't swear by Allah's name and lie. Don't say, Wallah, this happened, or Wallah, that happened, and be dishonest. Don't bring Allah's name, don't swear by His name when you lie. Isa alayhi salam says, I'm going to tell you something more than that. وَأَنَا آمُرُكُمْ أَلَّا تَحْلِفُوا بِاللَّهِ صَادِقِينَ وَلَا كَاذِبِينَ. Isa says, my advice to you is, don't swear by Allah whether you are truthful or lying. Don't invoke the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when it comes to trivial issues. This is how much the likes of Yusuf, they have reverence for the name of Allah. He doesn't say, Wallah, she seduced me. No, he doesn't bring Allah's name. Allah's name is sacred. There's a beautiful story during the time of Imam al-Sadiq where it is said that a man performed Hajj, and after he finished his Hajj, he went to the city of Medina to visit the Prophet. And he was in the masjid of the Prophet. He wanted to pray, offer salah in the masjid. And the masjid was empty. It was late at night. And the only person who was in the masjid was Imam al-Sadiq. He was also praying. After the man finished his salah, he noticed that his belt was missing. At that time, people used to keep their valuables and their wealth, their money, in these belts. For those of you who've been to Hajj, those belts where you have a zipper, you can put valuables, it was something like that. So he sees his belt is missing. And the only person who's in the masjid is Imam al-Sadiq. So he goes to Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, and what does he say? He says, you took my belt. The Imam alayhi salam says, what belt? He says, I had a belt and it's missing, and you're the only one in the masjid. You took it. Imam, he says, what was in your belt? He says, I had 1,000 dinars. 1,000 dinars was a lot of money. 1,000 gold coins. Imam alayhi salam, of course, he didn't take any belt. He doesn't say, Wallah, I didn't take it. He doesn't get into an argument with the man. He says, he goes to his house. He says, stay here. He goes and he gives this man 1,000 dinars. The man, he takes it, thinking that the Imam took it from him and he was simply retrieving his right. This man, he was traveling, he was staying with someone in Medina. He goes back to his residence and he finds the belt. He did not even bring it with him to the masjid. So he goes back to Imam al-Sadiq. He says to him, I apologize. I accused you of stealing from me, but I was the one who forgot that my belt was at my residence. So here is your money back. Imam al-Sadiq says, we, Ahlul Bayt, what leaves our hands, we don't take it back. In this moment, Imam al-Sadiq did not say, Wallah, I didn't take anything from you. For Imam al-Sadiq, it is better to give 1,000 dinars rather than to invoke the name of Allah over some dunyawi matter. So Yusuf alayhi salam, he says, قال هي راودتني عن نفسي, that she is the one who seduced me. Now, Aziz is standing here in a very difficult moment. On the one hand, his wife is claiming that Yusuf is guilty. And she wants to she doesn't even want to discuss what happened. She wants to talk about what the punishment should be. قالت ما جزاء من أراد بأهلك سوءا إلا أن يسجن أو عذاب أليم. Yusuf is saying that she was the one who seduced me. Now he's looking, one is his wife, and the other is his adopted son, someone who is very dear to him, someone who he has trusted. As he's trying to figure out what to do, the Quran says, وَشَهِدَ شَاهِدٌ مِّنْ أَهْلِهَا. A witness came forward, مِّنْ أَهْلِهَا, from her family. Now again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions important details. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to know that this shahid is from the family of Zuleikha. He's related to Zuleikha. Why? Because this is someone who would naturally be biased towards Zuleikha. So if he makes a testimony that goes against the interests of Zuleikha, it has weight. وَشَهِدَ شَاهِدٌ مِّنْ أَهْلِهَا. Now there is a discussion about who this person is. There are some narrations that say that it was a baby who was from the family of Zuleikha who miraculously spoke. We have some narrations that mention this. But those narrations are weak, and many of our ulama, they discard these narrations. Why? They say that if it was a baby who spoke, there would be no need to present a logical argument on how to decide who the guilty party is. The fact that a baby spoke is a mu'jiza. The baby would just need to say, Yusuf is innocent, and that's it. But the fact that the speaker is giving a rationale, is giving a logical way to determine who the guilty party is, this is an indication that there is no mu'jiza involved. وَشَهِدَ شَاهِدٌ مِّنْ أَهْلِهَا إِنْ كَانَ قَمِيصُهُ قُدَّ مِنْ قُبُلٍ فَصَدَقَتْ وَهُوَ مِنَ الْكَاذِبِينَ. This witness was not an eyewitness, because only Zuleikha and Yusuf were in the room. This is not an eyewitness. This is someone who's presenting an argument that leads to the truth. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala considers them a shahid. This witness, this person says what? Let us look at Yusuf's shirt. If his shirt is torn from the front, that means she is truthful and he is lying. And then the witness says, وَإِنْ كَانَ قَمِيصُهُ قُدَّ مِنْ دُبُرٍ فَكَذَبَتْ وَهُوَ مِنَ الصَّادِقِينَ. But if his shirt is torn from behind, that means he is truthful and she is a liar. Why? Zuleikha is claiming that Yusuf forced himself on her. If this is true, she would have fought back. And in her fight against Yusuf, in her struggle to push Yusuf away, she would have torn the front of his shirt. And if Yusuf is truthful that he was running away from her, if his shirt is torn from the back, that means she was pursuing him. And she is the one who intended to commit haram. Now here, there is an interesting discussion. Some ulama, they look at this verse and they start to think about what constitutes proof and evidence in a legal case. You see, in Islamic law, to prove that a crime was committed, there are two ways. Either there is iqrar, there is confession. The person who's accused confesses. If they confess, the punishment is administered. If they don't confess, you can establish the crime through bayina, which is a type of religiously sanctioned evidence, where you have two just witnesses, two just male witnesses confirm that they witnessed the crime took place. In the case of zina, fornication, you need 4 just witnesses. There are some scholars that look at this, they look at this ayah, and they say that this verse establishes the permissibility of using circumstantial evidence in a case. Because there is no eyewitness here. This shahid is basically saying, look at the circumstantial evidence and make a judgment off of circumstantial evidence that yields certainty. So there are a minority of ulama. Of course, the traditional position is that no, We don't rely on circumstantial evidence. We need bayina. We need two just witnesses. There are others that say we can use this ayah to establish that in legal cases we can use DNA. We don't necessarily need two just witnesses or four witnesses. If we can establish that a crime was committed through DNA or through fingerprints, this is sufficient. So a minority of Sunni and Shia ulama, they say that we can use circumstantial evidence that leads us to certainty. And one of the arguments that they use is this incident in the story of Yusuf. Because Allah validated that line of argumentation. He validated that argument. In any case, the Quran tells us in ayah 28, فَلَمَّا رَأَى قَمِيصَهُ قُدَّ مِن دُبُرٍ. This argument was very logical. Aziz accepted this. So Aziz then investigates the shirt of Yusuf. And lo and behold, he finds that the shirt of Yusuf is torn from behind. فَلَمَّا رَأَى قَمِيصَهُ قُدَّ مِن دُبُرٍ قَالَ إِنَّهُ مِن كَيْدِكُنْ إِنَّ كَيْدَكُنَّ عَظِيمٌ. When he discovers that Yusuf's shirt is torn from the back, Aziz, he makes a general statement about all women. He says, this is from your scheming. And the scheming of women is indeed great. Now there are some people, whenever they get into an argument with their wife, they quote this ayah as if Allah is the one who's speaking. This is not the word of Allah. This is the word of Aziz. Of course, we don't believe in this concept that women are inherently cunning and manipulative. This is what Aziz, he says, that this is from your scheming. Now, so at this moment, there are four people who are aware of this scandal. Aziz, Yusuf, Zuleikha, and the witness from the family of Zuleikha. Now, Aziz is not an ordinary person. He's a politician. And the worst thing for a politician is for there to be a public scandal. So Aziz wants to ensure that this does not get out. He wants to contain this story. And this is a problem, and we'll speak about what is problematic about the reaction of Aziz. So Aziz knows that he's not going to share this story with anyone because it's going to make him look very bad. Zuleikha is humiliated. She's not going to share this story. The relative of Zuleikha, in their interest, they don't want to tarnish the name of the family. So the only person that they are worried about is what? Is who? Yusuf. And hence, Aziz, he turns to Yusuf. In ayah 29, Yusufu a'rad an hadha. Yusuf, turn away from this. Meaning, pretend this didn't happen. Pretend this didn't happen. This shows you, brothers and sisters, that people who are in power, unfortunately, many of them, they have pride, they have an ego, and the most important thing for them is that no one finds out. They tolerate corruption, but as long as it stays private, as long as no one else finds out. And what does he say to his wife? He says, Yusuf, instead of speaking to his wife first, his first concern is what? That the story doesn't go public. His first concern should be, what kind of woman are you married to? He says, Yusuf a'rad an hadha wastaghfiri li dhanbiki. He says to his wife, repent for your mistake. A mistake? A mistake is if someone, forgets to cook lunch. A mistake is if you forget your keys. She tried to commit fornication with her slave. This is much more than a mistake. The reaction of Aziz indicates that he also suffers of a deep spiritual problem. And that is that he has no ghayrah. He doesn't have that protective jealousy that is praiseworthy in men. We have many ahadith that speak about this quality of ghayrah. A man should be protective over the womenfolk of his family. We have a narration from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi, where he says, إِنَّ الْجَنَّةَ لَتُوجَدْ رِيحُهَا مِنْ مَسِيرَةِ 500 عام. The Prophet says the fragrance of paradise can be detected from a distance of 500 years. Imagine at that time, you're galloping on a horse for 500 years. If you were to gallop 500 years away from Jannah on a horse, you could still smell the fragrance of Jannah. But there are some people who will never smell the fragrance of Jannah. وَلَا يَجِدُهَا عَاقٌ وَلَا دَيُوث. A person who mistreats their parents, they will never smell the fragrance of Jannah. And someone who is a dayuth. They asked the Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, وَمَا الدَّيُوث? Who is a dayuth? قال الذي تزني امرأته وهو يعلم بها. Someone who has a wife who's being unfaithful to him and he's passive about it. He doesn't react. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, when he was the Khalifa, this is mentioned in his sermons, when he was in Iraq, one of the negative things that he saw about in the city, in Kufa, was that he saw that men and women used to mix in the marketplace. There was a lot of unchecked mixing between men and women in the marketplace in Kufa. So Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, he delivers a sermon about this. He says, Ya Ahl al-Iraq, نبئت أن نساءكم يدافعن الرجال في الطريق أما تستحون. Imam says, O people of Iraq, I have been informed that your women are brushing against men in the marketplace. Don't you have any shame? Don't you have any ghayrah? Don't you have any protective jealousy? Amir al-Mu'mineen would rebuke people. Aziz, he had this problem. He had no ghayrah. Yusuf, أعرض عن هذا واستغفري لذنبك. One more point before we conclude is that Aziz is not Muslim. He is not a monotheist. He's a mushrik. But even someone who is mushrik, who is not religious, understands that zina is something that is evil. It's something that is reprehensible. And this shows us that there are some sins that we recognize as repugnant and abhorrent through our fitrah. So even if someone doesn't subscribe to any organized religion, on the day of judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to judge you according to the dictates of your own fitrah. Inshallah, tomorrow night, we'll speak about how the news of this scandal actually spread all over the city. You know, the fear was that this would get into the public eye, and indeed that is what happened. Inshallah, we'll speak about that tomorrow night. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين.
السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله. وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. السلام على 9 المعصومين من ذرية الحسين: علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي. الصلاة والسلام عليك سيدي ومولاي يا صاحب العصر والزمان وخليفة الرحمن وإمام الإنس والجان. عجل الله تعالى فرجه وسهل الله تعالى مخرجه وظهوره. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.